Welcome everybody to the Luton update for this week. Here with Craig Sheargold, the head of sales at Luton Properties, and I am Nick Paine. Craig, last week we were just having a look. 227 sales. We were quite quiet on the auction front. We only had 2 going, but both got away, which is awesome. But one of the things we were talking about, I suppose, is as we've just come through a disgustingly cold long weekend for the King's birthday, the advantages of trying to sell in winter versus potentially waiting until spring.
Yeah, that's a interesting question, Nick, and I'm sure we've got a lot of potential vendors out there considering when should I get my house on the market and sell. So there might be people that are discretionary sellers that have a preference to sell, but they're not locked into an exact date. I think winter's a great time to sell your home. So the first main reason is there'll be less competition for you in the market. So traditionally, once we get to spring, we'll see stock levels will jump up by about 20%, which in effect means more competition. So less competition's a key one. But secondly as well, particularly with the people with bigger homes that someone might be purchasing who might have a home behind them to sell, is the closer you leave that to Christmas, the more nervous about the people upgrading get about, can we get a sale on our house this year? So particularly with the bigger properties in the stronger suburbs with good schools, good infrastructure, where the buyer for their house might already live in that suburb, for them to be able to find that house during winter and then have plenty of time to get their house sold is a great advantage and one of the great advantages of selling in winter.
I suppose it's one of the things that not a lot of people consider too, how long it actually takes from when you make the decision to sell versus, actually being done and dusted with everything. 6 months in our world can be nothing. Like, it just seems pretty normal and run of the mill.
Yeah, well, fortunately, we haven't got too many listings that have been on the market 6 months.
But I mean from when they make the decision to then appointing the agent, to then getting on, to then being sold, to then going through their settlement period, and especially if they do need to have that 90 days potentially to try and sell their own property, it's pretty quick that it adds up.
Yeah, so there'd be a good 3-week lead-in time once you've selected an agent to get the property on the market. If it was an auction program, that'd be run over 3 weekends. Our average days on market across both auction and private treaty selling is around, it's just over 40 days at the moment. So that's the time that you're on the market. And then there's the settlement period, which is now that we've actually exchanged contracts and our house is sold. And the average across our group on the settlement period is around 45 days.
And you talk about that scenario as pretty much for someone that's moving into a principal place of residence. But what about investors? Winter seems to be a really good time for people to try and pick up potentially a bit of a bargain, or while there is less competition, it's a chance, I think, for people to try and add to their portfolios or whatnot. But have you been keeping an eye on that?
Yeah, so, and I know we've spoke about it a few times, but we've finally seen an uplift in investment home loan approval rates heading up. In the March quarter, they jumped up by about 14%. A lot of those people borrowing that money would have a loan approval that would last, and you'd probably know better than me, but that would be 90 to 120 days.
3 months.
Yeah, so we are noticing, particularly in the more affordable price brackets, or with the properties that already have tenants in them, we are getting a slightly stronger response through the open houses, and that would correlate with more people have got their finance approved. So there's a lot of signs that for some people they're seeing that this slow easing of the market that's happened here across the Canberra region for a couple of years, if it has bottomed out and we're starting to see more investors come back into the market.
Looks like there's some opportunity for a bit of an increase in price too, with a bit more competition, which is awesome. Hey, thanks so much for joining us this week. We'll be back next week with another episode. Thanks so much.